In episode number 421 of the Reasons I'm Broke podcast, we cover the latest Ray Fisher Warner Brothers update.
We also have discussions on the new Batman villain, Ghostmaker.
And our comic book highlight this week, as chosen by you, is Joker Harley Criminal Sanity number 5.
All of this and so much more on today's show.
Hello and welcome to the award-winning The Reasons I'm Broke podcast, bringing you the reasons we're broke every single week, ranging from comics, movies, TV, video games, and more. I am your Emperor Palpa Kelli.
And I am Factory Head Daniel.
Ooh, what kind of factory are you running?
It's a terrible factory. I try to manufacture time, and it just doesn't work. I don't know if I'll be in business by next week.
Listen, there's no way. I wish, because I would buy out all the time that you had available.
Well, I have a strong feeling I'll be something else next week.
So for those of you joining us for the very first time, welcome to the show. We cover some news, which covers all of those things that I just mentioned. We have our Patreon shoutouts, which are our thank yous to everyone who makes the show possible, our comic book highlight as chosen by our listeners, and we wrap it up with our Broke Cat block, which is what happened with Daniel and I this week.
Kicking things off with what makes IDW one of the best publishers out there, they have extended their pledge to help the direct market by making comic books returnable through the end of 2020.
According to IDW, this allows retailers to order with confidence and to gauge customer demand effectively.
So this is where instead of a book that we'd normally order 4 or 5 copies, maybe, depending on how many people actually pre-ordered it and added it to their sub, we instead go, all right, we can return it at a later date. Why don't we order 10, 20 copies? Mm-hmm. And usually when it's an A and B cover, which usually there are, especially for any comic out there, I end up doing 10 of each. So 10 of cover A, 10 of cover B, whatever we don't sell during the returnable period, then I just return the difference and I keep maybe a copy or 2 for the bin. So it helps us find the ceiling. It helps me sell more copies, and it helps IDW sell more copies than they would have otherwise. Because when they don't have returnability, like Bill and Ted, for example, just came out this week, there was no returnability on that book. It's not an IDW book, but I'm just saying. So I ended up ordering 6 copies. And there were 2 subs down for it. And I'm like, well, Keanu Reeves, the artwork's kind of weird, but it is Keanu. I'm sure we can probably sell a couple of extras. But had it been returnable, I would have happily ordered 10 of each cover and probably sold better on it. So IDW doing this for the direct market, it is awesome. We have a quote here from Jerry Bennington, IDW's president, who said, quote,
"When comics historians look back at 2020, they'll reflect on how our industry survived thanks to the unmatched determination, customer service, and on-the-spot innovations of comic retailers. It's important during these challenging times to make the process of ordering and stocking products easier for our retail partners. Their success keeps an entire industry alive." End quote.
I am glad that IDW has their head in the game in the direct market, because that means that they have our confidence. We can order confidently with them. And unlike the big 2, which are AT&T and Disney with DC and Marvel, who are not doing returnability like they should be, then we will invest heavier on Image, IDW, Boom Studios, Dynamite, Dark Horse, the publishers that are there for the direct market.
I definitely agree with that. It seems like IDW knows there's a risk, right? There's a possibility that they could lose a little bit of money, but the people running it definitely recognize that, yeah, if you're not successful, right, in your comic shop, they are not going to be successful. Mm-hmm. They are going to go out of business. They don't have movies and TV deals and all these other things to fall back on. And even though for the most part, those aren't related, but they don't have those to keep people coming back in for their books and their characters. So they definitely need to do right by you. And they are. And I'm incredibly thankful for that, to make sure that you all are taken care of in your shops so that you can take better care of customers and know that, you know, they really have your back, which I think is fantastic.
And to anyone that thinks, well, if you're ordering 10 copies of something and then you're returning, let's say, what did I say, 10 copies. So we're returning 5 of them. And instead of me only buying 2 or 3 copies on a title like that, that's 1 or 2 extra subs now that are going to be there for issues 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So they've in turn sold another 6 books instead of maybe only haven't sold the 2, having no one added to their sub, and me in turn not ordering any because no one has it on their subscription. So it's a win for all. I think returnability should be a part of the permanent direct market. And I wish I knew the logistics from the publisher side on what kind of costs are actually involved in having books be returnable. But if it's working out really well for them on a book that especially people are going to add subscriptions to, and I'm going to end up ordering higher on number 2 if I sold 8 copies of something that I thought I was only going to sell 2 of, then I think in the end, over the run of the book, they're going to earn more money.
I definitely agree, but you also have to look at the facts that you're still smart within that. Yes, I can return these, but I'm going to be smart about it. I'm still going to order, a few over what's the max that I think that I can sell and go with it from there. That's not to say that there aren't other comic shops who are like, let's just order 50. We can return 47 of them.
And then they forget and they're stuck with all of them.
Potentially, or they return 47 of them. And now that's 47 more that they didn't need to print, or, IDW is now stuck with, or different things like that. So as they continue, and like you said, it sounds right now like it's doing very well for them. There may need to come a time where they put a cap on it and they're like, okay, well, you ordered 50 last time and you returned 47. So we're going to let you order up to this amount and understand that you still have the returnability within that.
The only argument I will have against that is that I don't think many comic shops have the free money to just risk upfront buying 50 copies of something. Because the returnabilities are like 2 to 3 months in advance. So if that comic shop is not on the brink of bankruptcy after COVID, then I guess order all you want, but I'm sure it's very few of them.
Well, yes, and that's my point. Very few of them that are doing that. But if it becomes a staple within the market, yes, that's something that you would have to look at on a long-term scale of, okay, well, how do we limit this so people aren't just being crazy?
There's some weird things where, like Spawn, for example, the latest issue, what they ended up doing is matching like a percentage of what we ordered, which is a Marvel move. But it works out better on Images because the way Marvel was doing it is they would say, all right, you ordered 3 copies of Champions, which is like a very low selling title. And they're like, we're going to go ahead and double your order of Champions. And I'm like, no, I don't need 6 more copies of Champions. I literally only need the 3. And it's because I have 3 subs down for, that kind of thing.
Right,
and they're like, well, here's 6 more. And the thing is, it's like, well, Daniel, they're free copies. What's the big deal? I still have to pay for shipping on all those free copies. They're not really free, and they're books that I'm not going to move. Whereas the way Image is doing it is they're like, all right, here's a title that's been hot lately, which is Spawn. We're going to give you a couple of extra copies free of cost, and that's a title that I'm like, all right, I wouldn't mind having some extras of that one because I know I can sell that off the bins.
With Marvel, it's like when I go to my mom's house to borrow something and she's like, oh, here, like, take some sour cream too. And I'm like, I don't need sour cream. Well, it's going to go bad tomorrow anyway, so just take the sour cream. It's like, you just don't want to throw this out.
Thanks, Marvel. Over to the DC side of things, we've got an all-new character from James Tynion IV and Jorge Jimenez. They have unveiled the character design to Ghostmaker, which is going to debut in the run of Batman.
We have a quote from James Tynion IV who said, quote, "The key to that idea was to create a Zuko to Bruce's Aang, the Gary Oak to his Ash Ketchum, the Draco Malfoy to his Harry Potter. Ghostmaker has a brief cameo appearance at the end of Batman number 100 and then enters the story in earnest in Batman number 102. I hope you all love him as much as I do. We might already have something we're building in secret with the character," end quote.
What a way to appeal to our fucking generation, our demographic.
No,
right?
You know what? This made me not want to read him because I'm like, nobody's Zuko. Okay. And Zuko wasn't even a bad guy.
That's not true.
No, but here's the thing. He tried to compare Batman to all these very light characters that are heroes. And I'm like, Batman's more of the Zuko. Batman's more of the Draco. Batman's more of the Gary Oak. Like, He's not Ash Ketchum like, everything is awesome. Everything's great.
You need to find his Ash and his Harry Potter. And
yes. Let's find that person.
I really don't know what this means. I guess a rivalry between Batman and this Ghostmaker character. But let's talk about the design, which I did put up on Twitter, and I put up a question on what the Brokehead Core thought about this new character that we're getting. And what were your first impressions on what Hood had put together?
I think my first impression is everyone's first impression, and that's how does he run in those pants?
Everyone brought up the pants.
Now, here's what's going to happen. He's going to jump off buildings, and the pants are going to act as a parachute. That's what it's for.
That might be cool.
I already know that that's what it's for. And like maybe he's got very deep pockets to hide things in. But at the same time, I was like, those pants are not functional. You can't run in them.
They're saying that this origin will go back to Bruce's earlier years, so it's going to be like a long-term type of rivalry or relationship.
Like very Middle Eastern looking, and if he was over there like learning stuff.
See, and that's what I thought was really cool. I don't think it would be too much awesomeness if this at all involved, especially since there's that Middle Eastern type of design to the character. It's using swords. I don't know if it's a he or she yet, but if it came out of some Ra's al Ghul story, that would be really cool for me because he's my favorite Batman villain, and it'd be another dynamic to that whole Al Ghul family. And then you can involve Damian Wayne, and that's a whole another thing because maybe he did know Damian, but that's all speculation. We literally don't know anything about this character other than what these designs seem to sort of influence with the swords and with the clothing.
I will say I'm starting to get frustrated when they kind of put the cart before the horse in the way of saying, oh, this is going to be Batman's greatest rivalry. Oh, this is going to be the next Harley Quinn. That just makes me not want to like them because you're already telling me that that's how I'm going to feel about it. Let me discover the character. Let me make that connection myself of, oh, this is Batman's greatest rival, rather than you tell me that that's what it is. And I get that artists are excited and they really want to talk about this character and what their intention is for this character. But just for me personally, you're telling me this is going to be the next Zuko. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's not going to be Zuko. It's not going to be Gary. It's not going to be Draco Malfoy, who's a very redeemable character. We're watching through the Harry Potters right now, and there's nothing redeemable about Draco. Anyway, the moral of my story is there's so many other great characters in Batman that I would already say, yes, that's Batman's greatest rival. Hush, right there, right? As somebody who's already established that you didn't have to tell me was going to be a childhood rivalry who's really going to test Batman. Like, I learned and I discovered that, and that was half the fun of it.
There's definitely been a lot of anti-Batman over the years. There was one, even the New 52, I think was the latest debut of one. Now, I don't know if this is at all an anti-Batman. They called it more of a rivalry. So this could be a character that toes that line between villain and hero. At the end of the day, maybe it's one of those like they have the same type of goals as Batman, but they go about it in ways that Batman does not agree with.
Like Azrael.
Yeah, pretty much.
like so many other characters that we've seen.
But I know that the reason they're talking about this character ahead of time and why they're really pumping these out, and he said it in that same interview, and I didn't include the quote because I didn't know if it was relevant, but clearly it is now, is they're trying to sell copies of this book to those people that want to collect the first appearances of these characters. So they're appealing to collectors, but mainly speculators. They're going to be the ones that want to get issue number 100 so they can own the first appearance of Ghostmaker. He did say in that same interview that after what happened with Punchline, that he learned that, okay, we can't just put out a character, let the story go, and then introduce another character. What needs to happen is the readers, the people that are actually reading the book, not the speculators, but the people reading it, need to be introduced to the next new character while they're reading that story so that it rolls over into the next arc. So what he did is, with Clown Hunter, they didn't intend to introduce him until issue 100, but he said, all right, let's introduce him in this Punchline arc in Joker War, and then people will be familiar with him because they're reading Joker War, and that'll kind of help the character have some legs beyond just the debut. And they said they wanted to do the same with Ghostmaker. They originally wanted to introduce him later on, but instead they said, let's put him in issue 100. That's going to be a pretty big issue based on the number alone, and it's kind of the end of Joker War. and then that'll familiarize all of these previous people that are actually reading the book to these new characters. So that, I think, is a pretty good concept. I know that probably fucks around with his story of, well, now we need to change this so that we introduce these new characters. I'm just afraid, again, of appealing to the speculators that are only there for those early appearances. And I hope that these characters do take hold of the readers, which so far you and I are readers. We're reading the Batman book. So far, we're not impressed by Punchline. Clown Hunter is okay. I don't really care either way either. And I hope Ghostmaker is that exception. And we think, you know what? He is kind of a cool character too. But as you mentioned so far, we've kind of seen this character already. And I think it's going to really depend on what this origin is.
100% agree. I will say that I like that they are trying to find the formula that works best for the readers, because a lot of what we like in society, whether it's advertisements or our perception of when we go out into the service industry, et cetera, is very much based in the psychology of those things and how do you present it and how do you, a great example I use all the time is in the service industry, if you use the word excellent sometime in your conversation with someone, if they get a survey, they're more likely to click excellent because they have that word associated with their experience with you, right? So same kind of thing. I like that they're trying, and it's always fascinating to me to try and find the psychology of how do you get people to like certain things. So I do really appreciate that they're looking at it and saying, we're finding we have a better opportunity if we do things this way. So I don't know that I necessarily feel they're appealing to the speculators, except to tell them, pick up issue number 100, but that also helps you as a retailer to know, here's the first appearance, so I don't have people calling me all day long because I can order up on those.
Exactly.
So yes, I do appreciate that. But don't go telling me that the amazing villains of my childhood, that this is another one, because it's probably not going to be. And now I'm even more skeptical, and now I'm going to judge it even harder. Thank you.
We have a quote here from when we asked what other Brocats thought of Ghostmaker, and this one comes from @VA_blues, who said, quote,
"Top looks cool, but the pants? Not sure what's going on there. Either way, this team is killing it on this book." End quote.
I think you and VA
everyone
pretty much agreed on it. I know a lot of people didn't like the pants. I think they're fine. Again, I think it's kind of a cool Middle Eastern look to it, but I don't know where this tech comes from or where this origin is yet. So once we know more, I think the design will make sense. I do think it's a cool design. Absolutely. I like that the cape sort of is halfway instead, and they can hide their swords within that when they attack. And you can kind of see some action shots in that design variant that they're going to come out with. I think to wrap up our thoughts on Ghostmaker is, I do also agree that it's great that they're giving us a heads up. Hey, there's this villain coming. There's this new character coming. Make sure to order up. That helps me a lot. And this also will satisfy, I guess, or you can now point to these characters that are constantly asking, why is there another Joker story? Why don't they come up with new characters? It's like it's in Batman. Go read that if you want new characters, because they are coming out. And if you want to support those new characters, they're there for you. Punchline is getting her one shot. If you want new characters to do well, you better buy that Punchline one shot. So there's these opportunities. It's just a matter of, at the end of the day, people still are happy. As much as they say they don't want more Joker, they happily go out and buy more Joker. They happily go out and buy more Batman. When they complain, more recently, they complain about Spider-Man having 10 titles on Marvel side. It's like, all right, well, when readers stop buying Spider-Man books, maybe they'll publish less. But every time they do, people flock right to them.
We are creatures of habit.
Apparently.
Sticking with the comic book news, we do have DC Generations, which is returning after its hold with Generations Shattered #1 as an 80-page, $9.99 one-shot.
Generation Shattered solicitation reads, quote, "A threat of cosmic proportion to DC's newest and oldest universe compels one of the most unusual groups of heroes ever assembled to take on the most mysterious foe they have ever encountered. Join the Batman, the original Batman, Kamandi, Starfire, Sinestro, Booster Gold, Dr. Light, Steel, in their quest to save the universe before time runs out." End quote.
The original Batman they're referring to is Purple Glove Batman, as designed by Bill Finger and Bob Kane.
when I looked at the cover, Sinestro is Green Lantern Sinestro.
Oh,
So this is like a back in
yay.
time
Okay.
team. And Starfire has the big 80s hair, like all
Yeah.
curly and everything.
And her
Batman's-
like super tiny dress.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I love that Sinestro's back there. And I can't wait for this. I want to see how original Batman interacts with Green Lantern Sinestro, who defied the Guardians, but still ran his sector with an iron fist in a way. He and Hal agreed on so many things back then, in spite of them being somewhat different now.
So remind me and correct me if I'm wrong, but Generations is a teen book? No?
No, so this was originally that thing that Dan DiDio was pushing for, where it was Generation 1, Generation 2. It was supposed to kick off with Free Comic Book Day, but this is the one in which they would be a time jump into the future. The original heroes are no longer there, and there's new characters that have taken up the mantle of Batman, Superman, all of that. And there was a lot of negativity online over that, because we know that when you take away Bruce Wayne Batman, sales suffer. People want Bruce Wayne Batman. They don't want a new character. So there was a lot of back and forth, and we never really got to see any of those titles. After Dan DiDio got fired, all of those plans really changed. And there's rumors of some editorial teams really being against this idea, some creative teams being against it, and some being for it. Scott Snyder did say that they were still going to do it, but not on the scale that originally was planned, and that the story is going to change over it. And this sounds to me like it's instead going to be kind of like a multiverse type of event, where they're bringing back these characters in their original form instead of making those new ones that I guess Dan DiDio wanted to go with.
I think this is a smart way to start that, because you still have, like you said, the characters that we know, even though we didn't read them back then, right? We still know Batman, we still know Starfire, etc. But then people who were also reading during that generation are going to be more drawn to that and say, oh, that looks like the character that I remember. That looks like the character that I used to read, and pick it up. And I mean, of course, Booster Gold can travel anywhere in time. So just let him be his weirdo Booster Gold. We also have something else returning, and that is the Batman Black and White series. It's coming back for 6 issues in a 48-page prestige format for each.
The creators involved will include Paul Dini,
Cool.
J.H. Williams III,
Yeah.
James Tynion IV,
Okay.
Tom King,
Awesome.
Chip Zdarsky,
Yeah.
and more.
Cool.
Previous runs in the Black and White series have been translated into motion comics, action figures, and statues.
These will be releasing on December 9th. They start at $5.99.
I'm a pretty big fan of the Black and White series because they can do things that are different outside of continuity. They got really creative with some of these stories. The only thing is a lot of them are hit or miss. You don't really know what you're getting out of them. And in the grand scheme of things, they don't really have any deep repercussions to you don't see these versions again in the future, but you do get some really cool stories. One of them that I remember pretty vividly more recently was the Neil Adams story of a zombie Batman, in which he literally felt powerless in the world of investments in Gotham and the money side of things in these businesses, the crooks that are high up in the chain that Batman can't really do anything about. And that's when anytime he was around those people, he would revert into a zombie form, where anytime people would say, Batman, I really need help. I don't have a job and I can't do this, this, and this. And that's when he would just revert into this zombie form and say, I'm sorry, I can't help you. And this was all a dream sequence that Bruce was having. And when he wakes up, he says Batman can't help them, but Bruce can. And that's when he goes into Wayne Enterprises, and that's the end of the story.
I have chills. Yes, you can, Bruce Wayne. You can do it. Help the people.
So there's some really good stories in there, and I'm sold on Paul Dini alone. It looks like there's some really good talent behind these, and there were in the past too. So I do like that they're also in that prestige format. They're going to be a little bit pricier, but it sounds like they're more or less closer to the DC Black Label books.
What I enjoy most out of all these black and whites is the statues that we get also. We have some great black and white statues from some of our favorite artists, and you have them displayed all the time in the case, and they're just fantastic. So hopefully we get some more of those as well.
We never covered it on the news, but DC Direct is no longer going to be a thing. AT&T is deciding instead to bring license out the characters to actual toy makers. Maybe we did talk about it a few weeks ago.
We did talk about that. It doesn't mean we won't get Batman black and white statues.
They just won't be done by the same people. They'll look a little bit different.
You don't know that they won't still be good.
They might be better. You're right.
I don't know. Thank you.
We have more Batman news here, though, but this time on the movie side, as Robert Pattinson has contracted COVID-19, which has caused production to stop for the filming of The Batman.
That was an interesting way to say contracted.
What would I say?
You said contracted. That means he contracted someone to give him, he paid somebody to give him COVID-19.
Or he contracted the disease itself.
He contracted COVID-19. So Matt Reeves' The Batman was originally scheduled to release June 2021. That was pushed back until October. We don't know at this point if this means it's pushed back even farther. It's going to put them a little behind. At the very least, he's out for 14 days, right? So, we'll see.
The original story ran that a crew member had what is it? Contracted, right? See, because when I think of contracted, I think of like birth, like the contractions.
Oh, that's a thing too.
So,
but to contract someone is to like pay them. Like, I'm going to take out a contract on your head.
You know what? Someone got sick. All right. The original story was that a crew member got sick.
Somebody's sick.
And they didn't know who it was. And that's why they had to stop production. And then the news story came out that it was Robert Pattinson and that they were going to continue filming, just do his scenes, or do the scenes that did not involve the actor. But then it came out that they were fully stopping production. And there's all these stories of maybe they should just not film anything until this all blows over. Some are saying just wait till he gets better and continue filming. I don't know what it's costing them, but I have a feeling that if they were to completely stop and wait for the disease or the spike to go over, that it could be probably a year before they continue or start doing this, because what could inevitably happen is they wait a year, they start filming, and then a week later someone else catches it again and they're like, well shit, we should have just kept filming this whole time, we could have had it done. So I think the right move is, as you said, put him out for 14 days?
Minimum 14 days, yeah.
And just make sure, be there for him. Make sure that there's no pre-existing conditions, because it could still be a deadly thing for him. And then if he ends up getting better, continue to take the proper precautions, test anyone that he may or may not have acted with, and then go over from there after they've been cleared. And I think that's really the right move. I think it should be a standard practice of let's continue on and keep doing these tests, because this thing is not going away anytime soon.
I definitely agree with that. You see it in so many businesses now. You check every employee when they walk in the door. You're asking them questions. You're making sure, hey, if you're sick, you need to stay home. And that's just kind of where we are in the world right now, because realistically, it's going to be many, many, many months before this thing is entirely gone. It may never be entirely gone. It's just, what steps are we taking to make sure that we're safe in the environment we're in so we can continue doing the things that we need to do.
We wish Robert Pattinson a speedy recovery.
Continuing on with some, I guess, big screen news, sort of. It stemmed from something on the big screen. But after Warner Brothers released a statement that Ray Fisher was not cooperating with third-party investigations on Joss Whedon's abusive behavior on the set of Justice League, the actor gave more details on the matter.
All the tea here, Palpa Kelly. All the tea.
That's some spicy tea right here.
So the Warner Brothers statement read, quote, "This investigator has attempted multiple times to meet with Mr. Fisher to discuss his concerns, but to date, Mr. Fisher has declined to speak to the investigator. Warner Brothers remains committed to accountability and to the well-being of every cast and crew member on each of its productions. It also remains committed to investigating any specific and credible allegation of misconduct, which thus far Mr. Fisher has failed to provide." End quote.
To summarize that, we did everything we could. we tried. We tried all the things. He's just not cooperating.
The haters immediately came out and were like, see, he doesn't have anything. And all of us were like, just wait, keep an eye on Ray's Twitter, because he's going to post something. Give it a couple of hours. And sure enough, he fucking did.
So this all started, in case you have forgotten, with Ray's now classic tweet where he said, quote, "On-set treatment of the cast and crew of Justice League was gross, abusive, unprofessional, and completely unacceptable. He was enabled in many ways by Jeff Johns and John Berg. Accountability is greater than entertainment." End quote.
That's what started this snowball effect of there's other crew members that were affected by this behavior, but we're going to learn more as we continue on with this investigation. In response to what Warner Brothers had put out about Ray supposedly not cooperating with this third-party investigation, Ray provided a screenshot of email evidence of the Zoom call meeting in which he had with this third-party investigator. Turns out he felt that this wasn't so impartial.
We have a quote from Ray, quote, "Just got off the line with the investigator. He had to end the interview early before going into detail with him. He's definitely been put on the case by Warner Brothers Pictures, not Warner Media. His findings will go directly and solely to Warner Brothers Pictures legal. He also had another person on the line as a witness, which we weren't made aware of. I told him I needed to have a rep on the line as security for myself. He tried to keep me on the line, but I told him I would need to consult my team before proceeding. Can we jump on a call to discuss this soon?" End quote.
The perfect tweet I read on this was, Ray is not playing checkers, he's playing fucking chess. What a smart way to fucking handle this, because he knows that if there's someone else on the call, you better, and they don't want to identify themselves, there's something fucking going on.
Hell
it's
yeah.
not as impartial. It's someone that obviously Warner Brothers hired that is going to have Warner Brothers intentions or best interest. They're not there to look out for Ray, they're there to look out for WB.
Listen, I also get that the way the world is, you want to do everything by Zoom meeting, but I feel this is not a situation that should be done via a Zoom meeting. You need to sit in a conference room, sit 6 feet apart, whatever, but definitely be there, right? Have Ray have his representation, because it's so shady to just be like, oh, there's no one else here. There's no one else here. It's just me. Like, oh, stay on the line. Oh, you want counsel? No. Let's just stay and talk, right? That's not okay, and that's not the way to handle it. And yeah, it's just going to make the company look even worse because you're saying you're doing the right things to take care of your employees, and you're not really. You're still trying to spin it in your way.
That's exactly what ended up happening. As soon as Ray came out with this, it became a shit fest for Warner Brothers of, what the fuck are you guys doing? You're now lying about this as well. You lied to us about Zack Snyder and Joss Whedon, how you were saying that this is his friend and Zack had personally picked him out to finish the movie and it was just a couple of reshoots. We've been lied to for years, and now they're still lying after all of this, after being forced by AT&T to finish the Snyder Cut, going to HBO Max. Warner Brothers is they're still the bad division here. They're still the ones lying in spite of everything else. So we're pointing to AT&T and going, what's going on down here with this division you own? Maybe you guys should start cleaning out more of that housing that's in there. Maybe more heads should start rolling.
Well, the thing too is, do they think we're not going to find out?
Right.
Do they think people aren't going to know that they're lying? Like, in this age of media and, internet and everything, you put anything online or talk to anybody about anything, and yeah, there's going to be screenshots, there's going to be tweets. We're going to know about it. So what are you doing?
They still don't know what they're doing with this handling here. It's ridiculous. They need AT&T or HBO Max to hold their hand when it comes to these productions. And apparently they need someone from AT&T to handle the rep and handle the PR department on Warner Brothers' side and figure out what is going on with this investigation. This has all led to a swell of support from the Snyder Cut movement, and now Jason Momoa has pledged his public support on the matter via Instagram. He's the first major name after Ray Fisher to back up Ray after these allegations. So far, Ben and Gal and all of them had stayed kind of out of this matter because there's a lot of legal who knows that could, if you say anything. And Jason Momoa being the one who's always there, he's always there with Ray about the Snyder Cut. And he and Ray are clearly friends from all of the previous interactions that they've had during the production of Justice League and since. That now he has come forth and pretty much said what he's saying is correct. I'm another big name that can back all of this up. And as soon as Jason Momoa came out with this, a lot of the people that were calling Ray a liar, saying he had no evidence, he's got nothing, he's just mad about his career, suddenly didn't have a lot to say anymore. Because now you have another actor who in their eyes has a lot to risk coming forward and doing what's right and backing Ray Fisher.
It's not just Jason Momoa, though. Ray Fisher says he knows several people who are willing to speak to investigators about their own account of the Justice League reshoots. If they handle this correctly, if the investigators do this correctly, you're going to get accounts from people who will probably never come forward. We will never know their names. But if they know it's going to be anonymous and their story can be heard, I'm sure there's, many, many more than that who would come forward and say things.
There was also the information we got from, I believe it was Ray also himself, that Walter Hamada, head of DC Films, had said we can throw Joe Whedon and John Berg under the bus, but we're not going to go after Jeff Johns. And Ray was like, no, we're going to go after everyone that was involved in the abusive behavior. Anyone that enabled this behavior has to also pay for it. And the way that they were kind of sort of trying to fix this was to give Ray that cyborg role in The Flash. And now there's rumors of like, well, maybe they'll take that away now because of what's going on with this. And
so they can get murdered even more?
It's like Ray does not give a shit about that. He's already said from the beginning when this all started, when we read that classic tweet of accountability is greater than entertainment. Mm-hmm. That's what's important here. And for Walter to try to protect Jeff Johns and let the other two fall obviously means that Jeff's more valuable to the company than the other two because Jeff is more involved in other productions and in the books. But Ray is going, I don't care who you want to protect. We need to hold these people accountable.
Well, beyond that, you're saying Jeff's more valuable than all the people who were wronged. Mm-hmm. Like every other cast member, true. Every actor. You're saying, oh, well, we'll punish the other two, but we're going to leave him alone because he's more valuable than you are. Like, no, that's not okay.
Absolute insanity. And we went out and asked you, what do you think Jason's most recent support of Ray means for the investigation?
We have a quote here or a tweet here from @menarestillgoo1 who said,
who did tell me if we're going to give him a shout out to say @menarestillgood. I wanted to make that clear, but I also told them that how are people going to find your otherwise?
Yeah.
So I guess @menarestillgood. And if people find them, great. He should be linked to our, if you're following us, you should be able to find his, but I guess just call him @menarestillgood.
Okay.
Appreciate the tweet. Perfect. Regardless. Thank you very much. He's got a lot. They have a lot to say here.
Quote, cliches are cliches for a reason because they usually have some truth to them. So mine is that where there's smoke, there's fire. Some out-of-bounds stuff happened at the reshoot set, and it needs to be addressed so that the whole conglomerate can learn and move past it. #I stand with Ray Fisher, end quote.
I think that was the part where I'm like, where there's smoke, there's fire. There's a lot of fire here because we know in the grand scheme of things, we know very little about what went on in the production of Justice League. Like there's these older emails about Gal Gadot and how she was allegedly locked in her trailer by Joe Whedon and who also threatened her career, threatened everyone's career. Jeff Johns threatened Ray's career, but an official list of legal, this is what happened, and here's all of the allegations, here's all of the cast members that are backing this up, here's this email evidence. I'm sure there's probably emails or calls between different cast members about these situations when they were filming this. Maybe even Zack Snyder might know a thing or two, so if they get him in this as well, there's going to be even more. But Ray has to be very careful about how he goes forward with this because clearly Warner Brothers and whoever they hire as these quote-unquote third-party investigators don't have him in mind. They don't really want to protect these cast members. They want to protect this big company. So I think we need to be definitely patient in how they go about this. And Ray is being really, really smart and has the right people around him to really people that he can go to and say, hey, what's the right step here? What do you think we should do? I'm thinking of doing this. Legally, what should I be doing? And so far, all signs are pointing to, especially with Warner Brothers doing all of these shady, nervous things, that he's going in the right direction. The truth is going to come out and it's going to come out well.
Listen, Warner Brothers, if you need some new PR managers, here I am.
You have their best interest in mind, don't you?
I have the best interest of everyone in mind, but I only say the truth. I'm not going to go and saying he wouldn't come out for a comment. Like, that's so stupid. Fire those people. Hire AT&T, HBO if you're listening.
There
you want a clean house? Here I am.
The palpiness.
We'll
figure all this shit out.
Only saying the best. And the truth.
Absolutely.
I'll make your company look good again.
We appreciate it, though, @menarestillgood for responding. And keep an eye on our Twitter because we do put out these news stories ahead of time to get your feedback as well. A lot of great stuff happening, though. Very interesting times for the DC films, for the people that were involved in the DCEU. And overall, even after DC fandom, we're going to have more DC fandom after this weekend. So next week's episode will probably have some more comic news based on what they put up on the website, dcfandom.com. But for now, that does wrap up our news for the week. we're going to do our once a month roundup of what's new on HBO Max. These are the September 2020 highlights.
Keep in mind, this is not everything that's going up. This is just what pertains to us from my new employers, HBO Max. But you can find the full list on Google, what's new on HBO Max, September 2020.
First one on this list, there's a lot of Kevin Smith fans in the Brokehead Core, and Clerks is now going to be on the service.
I saw this once. I liked it okay, but I know so many people think this is one of his greatest films.
It is my favorite movie that he's done for sure, and it is, I think, very, very solid. It's what helped him get the rest of his movies made. Absolutely worth a watch.
Up next, we have Grease.
We had talked last week it was on Netflix, but now that it's on HBO Max, it'll play better on HBO Max. So don't watch it on Netflix. Watch it on HBO Max instead.
It won't be about people trying to force women to sleep with them if you watch it on HBO Max. I do have a funny story about Grease. So somebody came through my drive-thru the other day with his little baby puppy, right? And it was so cute. It was a baby golden retriever. And, you know, I was talking to her about the puppy, and I said, oh, what's his name? And she said, Zuko. And I was like, oh, my God, Avatar: The Last Airbender? And she's like, no, from Greece. And I was like, nobody knows who that is. Tony Zuko, whatever his name is. I was like, no, get out of here.
What a contrarian.
Right.
No, from Greece.
And she's like, I thought everybody would know, but nobody knows. And I was just like, it's the truth.
She's like, what the fuck is The Last Airbender?
Probably.
Why does everyone keep saying that? Next one on here, the Brokehead Core said on Discord that it's worth watching, and I may jump on it. It is Harvey Birdman, attorney at law. I think it was originally on Adult Swim, but now on HBO Max.
I watched like an episode when I was younger, but it definitely was not for children, so much of it went over my head. So it'd be interesting to watch it now and see how much, if I could even get anything out of it.
I love that there's so much Adult Swim and Cartoon Network content on HBO Max. It gives me a lot of nostalgia to that time where these things would be on TV, not on demand. You couldn't just stream these things. But now I can catch up on those shows that before I was like, that looks pretty good. But, at that time I was already working and it just didn't have access to cable really. And now that we have HBO Max, I can go back and catch up on all those years of apparently quality shows.
Is Reboot Chicken on there?
Yes, it is.
I love me some Reboot Chicken.
Got to watch all of those. Also on the list is Impractical Jokers seasons 5 through 8, as well as the Impractical Jokers movie.
We haven't watched Impractical Jokers in a while, but it was something you loved for like the longest time.
I know they had to stop production because of COVID, so the newest season is still up in the air. They can't really, it involves being out in public and being around people within 6 feet a lot of the times. So they have to be really careful about how they go about filming this. And I think it'll be a while before they get that new season, but it is great. It's on True TV. It's probably their biggest show and was for many, many years. It does star primarily Brian Quinn from Tell 'Em Steve-Dave. We had talked about Kevin Smith and Clerks.
It stars primarily Joe.
Joe's your favorite?
Joe's my favorite. He's great. He gives no fucks. He will just do whatever.
I like Brian Quinn because of Tell 'Em Steve-Dave. So when I see that, and he always wears the TESD shirt too on top of that. So I think that's why.
It's Joe. You know what would happen now if they started filming? The one thing that nobody would ever do is if they're in public and they're like, now cough. And they're going to be like, no, I can't.
Joe would do it though.
Yeah, Joe would do it.
Another one on this list is a DC film, V for Vendetta.
When this came out, I was in high school and everybody was like, yeah, V for Vendetta. And I don't think I ever really understood it, but I was cool and I was edgy too. So I liked it.
Tried playing it at the shop and then saw it was rated R. So cannot.
No, you cannot.
Next on this list is from, I think it was Ridley Scott. He should have directed this one too, Prometheus, the surprise prequel to Alien.
Oh.
Where until the very end, I don't know if it was a post-credit scene or just the final scene of the movie, the little xenomorph gets born out of the Prometheus alien. And that's when people were like, holy shit, this is all connected to the Alien franchise. And it was a pretty big surprise.
That's awesome.
Even though it was strongly speculated before that. And then later on, we started getting those new Alien films.
Very cool. Blah, blah. Very cool. And finally on the list, we have Raised by Wolves Season 1.
Definitely a Ridley Scott production. He ended up directing the first 2 episodes. I've seen 1.5 episodes so far. I'm definitely hooked. The premise involves a far-off future where androids are so advanced and well made that they are programmed to act in an emotional way as well. So we're following these two androids at first who land on this remote planet. Their primary goal is to find the habitable planet and produce. And the way that they are kind of organic in the way that they're built. There's a male and a female. She ends up giving birth to, I believe it's 6 offsprings. And they're trying to make it through and keep them alive in this new planet that may or may not be habitable to them. And you're kind of finding out that as they're losing children, there's a rift between the two parents of, we should just preserve the kids we have and leave. And the other parents saying, no, our primary directive is to stay here. And if we can't make it, then this is our mission, to stay here. And if we die here, we die here. So that's where you're kind of connected to this, because as a parent, you're kind of siding with one, but then you're also siding with the other. The sci-fi is incredible. The special effects are really cool. And then the second episode, you're following what were established as villains in the first episode, and now you're connecting with them. So I'm like, all right, this is now multi-layered. Now I'm starting to side with the villains too. And it's a very solid show. I really recommend it. It's coming out weekly. You can't binge it, but the first 3 episodes went up right away, and then every week they're going to put out a new one.
I already know I can't watch this because you started with they lose children, and I'm like, nope, done. Not for me, but I'm glad you're enjoying it. I do keep getting notifications from HBO, like, listen to the podcast of Raised by Wolves.
I saw that.
And I was like, no, but thanks, HBO Max.
I might check it out. I might have to.
I'm too busy working for you, HBO Max. I can't just watch things.
I'm just afraid that if I listen to the Raised by Wolves podcast, that they'll start covering, usually they cover the latest episode. And being that I can't keep up with it on time, I don't want the show spoiled for me. So I think it'll be one that I'll listen to once I'm all finished with it.
Okay. But that does wrap up our news for the week. A lot of great stuff in there. A lot to talk about. A job offer for me too.
Apparently,
so
something that you're like, I work for you now. But let's head into the thank yous to everyone who make the show possible. It is our Patreon shout-outs of the week.
This week, we have 4 shout-outs. The first one goes out to Kat on Instagram @_OurNest.
Kat posted the latest tenants to her garden, caterpillars.
I love caterpillars.
She likes them too. She loves that she's going to have butterflies in her garden, but she's like, swipe for the destruction. And then she shows all of the crops that got eaten and destroyed. Or the gardeners are like, yeah, those things are destroying my garden. And it's kind of like you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, because butterflies are great, caterpillars are awesome, but it's one of those things that I think you and I, if we had that, if we were growing a major garden, we would end up relocating them somewhere else. I think we'd end up picking each one and taking it somewhere else, or maybe planting a something plant that doesn't grow any kind of fruit and kind of being like, you can eat that one, but not these.
But then they'd be like, no, I want to eat that one.
That's how they are.
And then they would go over and eat it. Yeah.
Remember when you were raising the one?
Yes,
the caterpillar,
I was
like
just
years
thinking
ago?
about that. I love those. I took them home from work, and they only ate like passion flower plants or something like that. So, yep, absolutely love them. I remember it turned into a butterfly and it flew away, and that was a really cool experience.
Next shout out this week goes out to Matt on Twitter @Mr. Forklift.
You can also find him at typingaboutmovies.com. He retweeted on September 5th, quote, on this day in history, 28 years ago, an animated series featuring the iconic Dark Knight premiered and started a television legacy. #BTAS, end quote.
Not only the start of the Timverse, but the greatest Batman anything we've ever gotten to this day. Batman the Animated Series is my favorite Batman anything. It's what made me a DC Beluga for life.
Really? You like that show?
They caught me when I was young too. That's why it's so important for them to have these kids shows, because you want to imprint that those legacy characters as young as possible, so that they grow up around these things, so that they end up when they get into adulthood, like, I do like Batman. Let me check out that Batman thing that is now aimed at my age.
Listen, Leo still already likes the Ninja Turtles.
That's right. And he likes Batman and Superman. And what other DC characters does he know? Because there's no Marvel characters here.
No,
not in this household.
Not a single. We do have some Spider-Man. He's got Spider-Man pajamas.
Weren't those gifted to us, though? And we don't really say, that's Spider-Man. We're just like, yeah, here's that shirt.
Here's a spider shirt, Leo.
An arachnid.
It's a Halloween shirt. Up next, we have Jared on Twitter at Spoon Sandwich.
Jared was in the Lazy Gaming Guys stream chat, breaking down the latest Xbox Series X announcements. He's also very active in our Discord, so if you have any questions about the new Xbox, Jared's probably the guy to answer it, because he definitely, like, I was joking and calling Jacques Professor Jacques last night, but it's really Professor Jared. He knows his Xbox stuff.
Cool, Xbox.
More like, video games. Oh. Like, we're both really out of it, but that's how I'm keeping up, thanks to people like Lazy Gaming Guys and Jared.
And our final shout out this week goes out to Scott on Twitter at Lazy Gaming Guys at Pandanime.
So one of the Lazy Gaming Guys himself was streaming Kandagawa Jet Girls. I keep up on weeb culture as well, because Scott is the biggest weeb I know, and it is literally a sexy anime girls jet skiing, but he was saying it's a pretty fun racing game, and all right. Okay. Like, he was streaming that on the channel.
On N64, wasn't there a jet ski racing game at one point?
We were saying it reminded us of Wave Race.
Yes.
Wave Race 64.
Yes, I used to play that all the time.
So I called it, is this just weeb Wave Race? Like, is that what this is? And he's like, kind of. So he was having fun with it, and it looks like they were all having fun. But huge thanks to Scott, Jared, Matt, and Kat for your Patreon support this month.
If you too would like your shout out every single month for as little as $1 a month, that's only 25 cents an episode, you too can have your Patreon shout out. Be a supporter. Help us keep the show running.
And you also get the show early every single week when you become a Patreon supporter at any tier. So keep that in mind. Instead of the episode coming out on Sunday, you can get it on Thursday or Friday. I always post it up a couple of days early. But we also want to remind you that you can also leave us a voicemail. There is a link in the description of today's episode, but if you want to be heard on the podcast, just head on over to speakpipe.com/thereasonsimBroke. Leave us a voicemail using your phone. Very easy. And you can be heard on the show.
But that does wrap up our Patreon shoutouts to the week. Thank you to every single person who helps support our show, even if it's just by tuning in every single week. But now we can move into our comic book highlight this week. Once again, as chosen by you, Daniel posts a poll every single Wednesday so that you get to decide what we review.
This week's comic book highlight is Joker Harley Criminal Sanity number 5, written by Kami Garcia, art by Miko Suyan and Jason Badawer, and colors by Annette Kwok.
This is a DC Black Label book, and the book is the majority in black and white, and then when you switch to the past or pretty big events, it does come in color, so that's why you have two different artists on the book to, have that different art between the present and the past.
This is going to be a spoiler-filled comic book review of issue number 5. DC Black Label book, no ads. It is in that prestige format. Really showcases the artwork. A couple of issues ago, we had talked about how one of the artists was leaving the book, and that was the one that was, I believe, doing the flashback scenes to the title. And since then, they have this new artist, and to me, it's been pretty seamless. I haven't noticed a major change from issue to issue, but this is a very psychological type of study on this version of the Joker, which is not traditional at all, and how Harley Quinn is an investigator, works with police. She's not a psychiatrist like in the comics. She's also kind of an FBI investigator in a way.
Criminal profile, sort of.
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
So definitely a more grounded, realistic take on these characters, but really fascinating to see all her notes and how she's analyzing him. And when she comes across this Joker, she's kind of understanding that this is a more realistic take, kind of like a mass murderer of you need to, view or at least appeal to his quote unquote art in how he's taking down these victims. And that ends up saving her in this particular issue.
I think I read the first and second issue and kind of fell off for the next two after that. So had to play a little bit of catch up coming back into this, especially because it jumps right in with the Joker being in her apartment. And you're like, oh shit, what's going on? The story seems very interesting. I will say the writing, especially in that first little portion, was a little frustrating when Joker and Harley were talking to each other because she would say something and then there'd be this giant blurb of, I'm saying this because of these things and I need to do this. And then right after that, Joker would say something and say, I need to do this because of this, because it's like, show me through the story. Don't have the character tell me why they're doing this. It just kind of took me out of the moment a little bit and just didn't make the character seem quite as deep.
I 100% agree. When I came to those panels, I was on board when it was just her point of view, because that's what we had gotten up to this point, a lot of her inner dialogue. But then we started seeing Jokers, and I get that they're trying to give us this origin of the Joker, but his going back and forth of, I should keep her alive because of this. It's like, no, we only needed to focus on one character.
Right.
And I know the book is called Joker Harley, but I think it would have benefited from removing all of those inner dialogues from the Joker and just leaving it at hers. I think it would have been a stronger work for sure.
Or even if you had, if you want to give us more of the Joker's inner monologue, fine, but have an issue where it's just Harley's, and then have a very Joker-focused issue where you get the Joker's monologue and you just get Joker's inner monologue. Don't flip back and forth between the two, because it just, like I said, jumping from one head to another just kind of took me out of the moment a little too frequently.
Overall, what do you feel about this more realistic take on the Joker, and how we pretty much saw his origin as he was finally pushed to the edge of, he seems to be the son of, I guess, a mom that's not well, because they immediately took her baby from her. So it sounds like her mom is at a psychiatric ward. He was given off to someone who's not his biological father and who didn't take care of him, and in fact abused him from the previous issues.
I don't think that there's anything wrong with that take on. I mean, we have so many different origins to the Joker that, this is just another interesting way to tell it. And, I did kind of like how he got that first smile on his victim. I thought that was a really interesting take. I didn't read the previous issue, so I guess I just wasn't as involved and invested in his story of why he chose to take these steps. And even immediately after, where he's like, this is just who I am now, I'm just kind of like, no, okay, Joker. And I will say that I felt that they tried a little too hard to make him a very attractive Joker with his muscles and his leather jacket and his very trendy haircut.
That's his Joker. He makes sure that his hair is on point.
I guess. I guess that's what he does. But I was still just like, you're trying a little too hard.
I think we said before that we were bigger fans of the Harleen series that they previously had done in DC Black Label. Now I think if you are more interested in the criminal backgrounds of these characters, a more psychological take on Harley and the Joker, this is definitely the book for you. But if you like your more traditional Harley Joker or more comic book take on these, then you're going to want to stick to the mainstream Harley Quinn series whenever they end up bringing that back, or even that Harley Quinn Red, White, and Black that they're going to release in physical print eventually. This one, I would say, the Black Label in general is more of an independent label for DC, where they are allowed to take these different takes, and we appreciate it for that they can do their own things, that they're not tied into the Joker needs to be this, Harley Quinn needs to be that. So far, it's been very independent of that. It doesn't need to be even the Joker or Harley, if you really think about it. It's just a compelling criminal story so far. But there are a couple of issues that we had with this fifth book.
I feel like as a whole, the series will be better read in a trade or all at once rather than in the little pieces that we're getting. And it probably flows a little bit better that way.
But thank you all so much for voting in on that new Comic Book Day poll. As you mentioned, we put it up on Wednesday mornings along with our Marvel, DC, and Independent haul, and that's where the poll goes up. But this week, we only got our DC books, and we'll tell you why in the final segment of today's show, which is what Pal Kelli and I have been doing this week. It is the Broket Block.
So we'll start off with what happened with you, because it's pretty big. It's the second week in a row now, and a little more significant than it was last week.
So the DC books come in through UPS several days before that Tuesday supposed release. We release ours on Wednesday because we, along with many other comic shops, believe New Comic Book Day is on Wednesday. It makes no sense to have two releases, one on Tuesday for just DC books and another one on Wednesday for Marvel and Indie. Instead, just release them all on Wednesday instead of worrying about having to put out the books on time on Tuesday and then making sure that they're out and also rushing to get the Marvel and Indie books. It just doesn't make sense, even from a labor standpoint, to do it on two separate days. So because of that, we get our DC books through a different distributor, through a different shipping on itself with UPS, and they came in no problem. So we had those books already. I counted them. We put them all out. We scanned them. We put them in boxes. They were ready to go. But Diamond goes through FedEx for the rest of the books, which are from Marvel and all the independent publishers. And those all got delayed. As of today, we learned it's because of a lack of labor on their end and the heavy delays and backup caused by the hurricanes that were recently going on over by Louisiana and Texas. So all of that shipment got really backed up, including our own. So as of now, as of us recording, we're not set to get them until sometime tomorrow. So it's been a lot of, the Wednesday Warriors still came in to get their DC books, and a lot of them knew ahead of time that Marvel and Indie weren't in. Because of that, traffic was lighter on Wednesday. I know the DC fans that only get DC books, they're like, I'm good. Like, I got my books. And we were on that end too, because I think Rise of Ultraman was really the only book that I definitely wanted to read out of the rest of them. But I kind of didn't really comb over the list. I know we were getting our DC books and we'd be reviewing some of them this week. But in this case, it is frustrating because, I have to assure the subscribers and the regulars that they are coming. It's just a FedEx problem. Like, we did our bit, Diamond did their bit. It's only a FedEx thing, and it's out of our control. And many other comic shops are also affected by this. I was looking at the Boost Your Comic Shop hashtag on Instagram, and other comic shops had only also gotten their DC books ahead of time from UPS, and they hadn't gotten their independent or Marvel books. So this isn't just a my shop thing. It's happening to a lot of stores out there, and it's not consistent either. There were a couple of weeks ago where some shops were saying this is our third week in a row of us not getting our books on time. And then there's other shops up to this point, like mine, where last week was the first week in which we had this major delay in several months. So I understand that it's all because of, it's just bad luck. It's not a thing where Diamond is now shipping these late or anything like that. They're still shipping them on the same time they always do. It's FedEx's problem of they're just so backed up with all of the shipment, all of these people shopping online all of a sudden, the COVID delays, and it is what it is. It's just, it's going to affect me when inevitably there'll be that subscriber, and I get really frustrated when this happens, but I don't know. I'm not really going to say anything more on that, but when someone can't wait for the books, so they end up getting them online or getting them at a different shop, and then they kick back the ones that we had ordered and pulled, so that's that many extra copies that I now have to sell, and that's a huge problem. But that's why I'm assuring all the subscribers, like, no, we're still getting them. It's just going to be a few days late, and so far it looks to be just 2 days late.
Do you think it's FedEx's problem, or do you think DC has something to do with that?
They're like, oh, what a shame. That's going to start a gang war between Steve Jeppy and whoever's running DC.
Matches Malone.
Hell yeah, matches whoever the fuck AT&T has over in Gotham that's causing all of these ripples in the comic industry. What the hell is going on? I don't know. Steve Jeppy's going to have a war in his hands.
That is so unfortunate, though. I know it definitely does mess up your week. You'll probably have to go in on your day off now to try and, get all that sorted so that people have what they need. I mean, that's just one of the cons of being in management is you just have to do what you have to do, even if it's your day off, to make sure things are taken care of.
And most subs are like, I'll just come in when they come in. And this weekend, we happen to be doing free comic book day weekend. So many of them are like, I'll just come in this weekend, get some free books, and pick up the rest of the stuff. So most subs are understanding, and they get it. They understand that this is not a Diamond problem. That's not our problem. It's a FedEx thing. It is what it is. It's just that small percentage of, I hope you don't get it somewhere else because they're here. They're coming. We paid for them. So they better be coming.
Right.
And, oh, well, like, that's we'll see what happens next week, but I don't see this as an ongoing thing every week, because then it would be a Diamond shipping delay, and they're not shipping anything any later than usual. Well,
that is unfortunate. Did you have anything good happen this week? You got to play some video games.
I got to start MLB The Show. I didn't talk about that last week. So I traded in. It happened right before I met up with Scott to our weekly dinner that we do every Thursday. And I brought a stack of PS4 games that I know I'm never going to play again, or that I never will finish and that I'll never have time for. And I'm like, why don't I consolidate all of these and get last year's copy of MLB The Show? And I know this year's had just come out, but I'm like, I don't need the latest copy because, I'm just going to play it for Road to the Show. And that's where you create your own character. In the past, the last one I had was MLB 15, and I'd only put in a couple of hours into that one, so I didn't even go deep into it. Before that, I think it had been MLB 11 or something.
Wow.
When I think I was still living with my parents and playing that, and then we had moved in and I was playing it then too, where I had put my picture through all of it. I made him the most arrogant fucking guy in the world, but he was so good. Like, I would pitch complete games, a couple perfect games here or there, just this unrealistically high stat player that I would take the White Sox to the championships every single year. Like there'd be games where we would lose by 1 run, or they'd take me out of the game for whatever fucking reason and we'd lose. And my player would argue like, why'd you take me out of the fucking game? Because I let 1 hit go and we lost the game, you fucking asshole. And the manager's like, you're sitting out, your next start too. And I'm like, what the fuck? We're going to lose games. And we would lose a shit ton of games. It's like, put me in the fucking game. And my stats were so high on pitching that I was in the American League. Pitchers don't hit unless they're playing in a National League home game. And I had put all my stats in batting too. I'm like, fuck it. Like I've got all these extra points. I'll just be a great batter. And that 1 or 2 times a year where I bat, then I'm fucking hitting home runs and doubles. And and it's like, just put me in the lineup somehow. And when I did eventually get bored and went over to the Dodgers, I was like, I'll be the best hitter on their team too. So I became the best hitter and the best pitcher. Literally, I was the defense and the offense for the team. That's how much time I put into that old MLB. And I wanted that again. So I went in, took my games into GameStop, got a shit ton of store credit, more than I expected. And I'm like, why don't I just get this year's MLB The Show then? It's got a cubby on the cover. It's got Zambrano, I think.
Okay.
And I'm like, oh, fuck. Like, I'll just print out another. I inverted the cover so I don't have to see his ass. And thankfully, he's not on the menu screen where it's like, look at him. Here's the cubby. And it's like, all right, cool. And at some point this week, I'm going to put in some White Sox announcers through the USB music thing, and it'll be all perfect. I'll have it tweaked out. It's going to take me a while, and that's the way MLB is, where I need to put in the custom sounds and the custom music, and that's why I love these games, because it lets you do all those things. But I'm discovering how much the game has advanced. You can really literally give a personality to your player now.
That's awesome.
You can have rivalries with other players and teams, and I'm just dipping my toe into it.
And romances?
There's bromance. It says bromance, so you can take that as romance, I guess.
It's more fun if it's a romance.
It's funnier, for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
So that's that. Yeah, I got to play a little bit.
That's exciting. And the White Sox are doing really well in like real life too.
Yeah, I got to see one of the games last week, and hopefully I'll be able to catch another one. But it's just a matter of in the part of Florida that we're at, they don't air White Sox games.
Right.
And right now, sports bars are closed anyway for the most part, or we just don't have time to just go to a sports bar and watch a game. So that's one of those things where if I'm going to watch it, it's going to have to be on one of these streaming services or on someone's ESPN Plus. So it is what it is, but I'm glad I got to watch a little bit.
As for my week, it was a challenging week. There's a lot going on in every aspect of my life. So definitely working through that. And like, if anybody has tips on how to not go insane every day, I would love to hear it.
Don't piss off Kelli this week. Just kind of steer clear.
Please, yeah, please don't. Just send gifts, cash, flowers, chocolates.
Reminds me of Beauty and the Beast. Promises you don't intend to keep.
You better keep the promises or else you're going to piss me off. So, I mean, puppies would be great. So, yeah, that's just kind of where, I mean, you know, ups and downs. Life is always about ups and downs, and you learn the most with the downs. So I'm just learning a lot this week.
It's one of those things where I'm the same way of, if the week is okay, I'm used to chaos. So I'll get uncomfortable. And you in your mind, you start creating chaos because you're used to putting out fires. And it's not until recently that I realized, like, you don't even realize that you're doing it until you're actually doing it. And the difference now is I'm starting to recognize, like, all right, why am I feeling this way? I better do something about it, instead of just rolling with it, and who knows where you're at 2 days later.
Well, I am definitely not creating fires. The fires are creating themselves this week. So
we tell ourselves that.
Yeah. Have I not told you of all my problems?
I'm just speaking for myself.
Okay. All right. Well,
how about anything else that happened this week? The last movie we had seen was Tenet. You talked about Harry Potter. We're going through those, and we're right now at the Half-Blood Prince.
Yeah. So I think the remainder of the movies I have seen before, but it's still good to watch back through the rest of them and laugh our way through because of the Snape and Harry romance that's very obviously there, right? Obviously. Everybody can see it.
James Gunn can see it. He's like, yeah, that's good. Can I play Snape
and Ron and Draco? So, yeah, really enjoying that. I don't know if I talked about it last week, if I finished it last week, but an author released a sequel to a book. And of course, I read it in like 2 days, and now it's going to be 6 months before we get the next book. And I'm just going through a book hangover. That's no fun. Have you ever been through a book hangover before?
Not a book hangover, just emotional one.
Well, it's so rough because you try to read something else and like nothing's as good as you just read. So you're like, you just want to throw the book and or my phone in this case against the wall and be like, this is bullshit. And meanwhile, they're probably very good books that I'm trying to read, but because I'm still trying to get that same feeling from the previous book, it's not going to happen. So there's a lot of Facebook support groups for me right now. And, and we're all kind of saying the same things and, you know, discussing the book a lot, which is, you know, really cool just to read even if I don't respond, just to read what other people pulled from it to, you know, get some extra out of there. So hopefully I get through it in the next few days and can go back to reading something else.
Hopefully you can smooth on over into a better week, but that's kind of the nice thing about a new day. It's a new start and a new opportunity to kind of set whatever day you try to have.
I learned how to put my phone on Do Not Disturb, but still have important people able to reach out to me. So that's where I am today. I'm like, well, don't bother me. Like, I'm at home. So just leave me alone.
I need to go, since we're talking about Harry Potter, AT&T's Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Which was previously on HBO Max. Now that we're going back through these movies and you kind of, you know, these characters and I know it's different to see this. You know, I was kind of telling you as we're going through these movies, you're seeing Snape as the good guy, and then you get to the end of Half-Blood Prince, and you're watching these or reading these books, and you're going, holy shit, I was wrong. This whole time I was so convinced that he was definitely a good guy, and then he goes and kills Dumbledore. And then it's not until the final book that you realize, oh, wait, she tricks you again.
Spoilers, Daniel. Spoilers.
So it's kind of cool when you go through these because the only thing I've realized as I go through these movies is I still love them. I think they're great. The third one is still my favorite one. But the way that Harry is written or the way that Daniel Radcliffe portrays him, he's not as relatable to me. Right. I think he does come off as like his father, kind of smug and kind of arrogant in times. And I remember the books, he's not written that way. In the books, it is a more quiet, sympathetic character. Ron and Hermione are definitely more nerdy and kind of the outcasts, just like Harry. And the relationship between Harry and Snape in the books is a lot more volatile. Like you can see the mistreatment that Snape has for Harry and all the awful things he does to Harry and the Gryffindor house. But then those slight moments of protection because of you find out eventually why he's doing these things. So in the movies, when you're seeing him go through that training of Snape's not going to show you how to keep your mind from Voldemort's, if you just watch the movies, you're like, that sounds good. Like, just work with him and learn these things. But if you read in the books, and you saw a little bit of it in the movies, but in the books, he's ridiculing his memories. He's constantly putting down his happiest memories and saying these are pathetic and blah, blah, blah. And just one of his worst enemies is now in his life and in his mind. And it's worse in the books than it is portrayed in the movies. So that's one thing that I'm noticing. I'm like, the relationship isn't as scarred up in the movies as it is in the books. I think if you read the books, you can really realize like why this is a terrible thing for Harry to go through, but he has to because Voldemort is the greater evil. So go through that embarrassment. And then when he goes and does that to Snape, it makes more sense in the book of he's had enough. It's been weeks and months of this, of almost torture, psychological torture. And then in the movies, it's kind of after a few times he gets mad at Snape and you're like, Harry, calm your fucking ass. Look, now he doesn't want to train you.
It definitely is now at this stage of my life. As I'm watching these, I'm having to, I won't say constantly, but kind of at the end of every one, think back to if I were 10, if I were 15, how would I view this differently? Because I understand that that's who these books were written for, right? The kids start out young and they grow with us as we've been through this. But I mean, again, 30-year-old Kelli is like, poor Harry has had such a bad life. Like, somebody just love this kid. How is he going to function as an adult having gone through all this? And then again, looking at the relationships that are building of why is Hermione interested in Ron? He's kind of an idiot and an asshole, and doesn't it all fit with her? And they're going to get divorced later in life because they're just so different that there's, no way that they can get through, right? Little things like that. So yeah, I do at the end have to kind of reflect and say, okay, if I were 10 years old, this would be really cool. And I would be like, yeah, they're awesome. So yeah, interesting.
Dumbledore's still a dick though. I still don't like him.
No, he's
still
horrible.
A bad character.
He's horrible.
And I know they try to make him cool in the movies. Like, look, now he's going to take on Voldemort. And I'm like, yeah, but the way he treats these kids.
Right. He was like, I tried to stay away from you, Harry, so you would be safe. Like, that is 100% the wrong thing to do, Dumbledore, because obviously it didn't work. Or when he's like, oh, that girl was pretty. And Harry's like, yeah, my 15-year-old ass is going to go tap that later. And he's like, no. And just like takes him away.
So it's weird, but I still don't like Dumbledore. I still relate to McGonagall and Snape more than any of the other characters. Thankfully, Snape hasn't changed for me, at least.
No, Snape is so badass. I actually like him even more, and like I feel for him throughout all these movies, even more than I did before. After that last movie with Umbridge or whatever, I mean, what's his name? Filch? Poor Filch. He's so sad. His girlfriend was taken away from him.
I like how you interpreted that they were hooking up.
Hell yeah, they were. You think he likes nobody in any of these movies except for Umbridge, and he's willing to do whatever she asks whenever with a smile on his face.
Gladly.
They were 100% hooking up.
That was my favorite part. Like, I don't see those two characters the same now, ever. Like, they're a couple.
I'm glad that I've made the movies better for you.
So we've got 2.5 movies left before we finish off the Harry Potter films, and they're getting darker and darker each time. But I am enjoying going through them, and I like seeing them now as I've seen more movies since then, and kind of, realizing that they're not amazing, but kind of still confirming that the third one was, still very solid and even still holds up. And I can't wait to see the last couple, because those are also very grounded, and that's when JK decides to start killing off every fucking character in the world. But we'll see what happens, and I'm glad that we're taking that time to knock him out little by little.
We're gonna have to figure out what to watch after these. I enjoy our little movie nights where we get through 30 minutes and then I fall asleep.
Do you have anything else before we close out today, though?
No, I think that's it.
So thank you all so much for tuning in this week. You can find us on Twitter at Reasons I'm Broke.
Or at Palpakelly, Kelly spelled with an I.
For a link on everywhere you can find us, head on over to thereasonsimbroke.com. You will find our Tumblr, Pinterest, Instagram, Facebook, pretty much everywhere we're at. There's also a player on there where you can listen to previous episodes of the show.
So thank you so much for tuning in. I am Emperor Palpakelly.
And I am Factory Head Daniel.
And Broke at Core.
All will be well. So how was Draco not redeemable at all?
He's just a little whiny asshole. Like I don't remember the last two movies that well, but I don't feel like there's ever a time where he was like, yeah, my parents were idiots. I shouldn't have followed them. I'm sorry. I should be on the right side of things.
This movie is supposedly the one, Half-Blood Prince, where Voldemort's forcing him to carry out the task of needing to kill Dumbledore, and Voldemort's only doing it as a punishment to the Dracos. Right. Because of his father's failures. So he's like, I'm going to corrupt your kid as well. And that's when his mom goes to Snape and says, you need to protect him and make sure he doesn't do this because he needs to not go down this path. And that's when Snape's like, yeah, totally. And that's when, what's her name?
Bellatrix Lestrange.
Why don't you do the unbreakable vow? And Snape's like, uh-oh. What a plot device for J.K. Rowling to just say, look, Snape had to do this, like just to still protect him in a way.
Right.
And that also told me that Snape really never intended, like, no, I'll watch out for him. Oh, you really want me to watch out for him? I guess I have to. Otherwise, they're going to show that I'm not loyal to Voldemort, really.
The thing that pisses me off, though, is why isn't Draco's mom like, okay, well, I'm going to find a way to kill Voldemort then? Like, so my kid is safe.
Yeah. I mean, that's one way. I don't know how powerful of a wizard or witch she is. I have no idea. Yeah, there's a lot of these characters where it's like, you could trust in Snape, who is very close to Voldemort, and she actually went to him to try to convince him, hey, can you please convince Voldemort to not do this? And Snape's like, I can't convince the Dark Lord, or whatever he said. And so instead, she's like, well, can you watch over him at least? And yeah, I would probably figure out, like, fucking sneak a gun in. Like, you can still fire at them, right? It's not like they're invulnerable to bullets.